What happens when the world closes its eyes on the most brutal weapon of war, conflict-related sexual violence? Why has the world still failed to stop it? I am Aya Shebi, and today on Africa Link, I am here in New York at the United Nations headquarters. I sit down with Pramila Patten, Under-Secretary General and United Nations Special Representative of the Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict. From Sudan to DRC, from Gaza to Haiti, her mandate is to end the use of rape as a weapon of war. Today, we talk about justice for survivors and why ending sexual violence in war remains one of the world's unfinished battles. Welcome to Africa Link, Madam Patten.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to take us back before the titles and the UN work to your time in Mauritius, growing up in Mauritius. Is there something you saw or felt that really ignited the fight for justice for you?
Growing up in Mauritius as a young girl, my values were shaped by a feminist father who went out of his way to impress on his 4 daughters that they were equal to his 2 sons, and that the sky was the limit, and that we should never compromise on our rights, and we should always stand up for our rights. And he had a great sense of justice. What I saw as I grew up is what we call in French justice à deux vitesses, uneven justice. And I felt it more justice for the poor and justice for the rich. And I recall there was an incident, actually, which really struck me. I was like 12, 13 years old. I was on a bus with my brother, and there was this old man who got on the bus and was moving very slowly, and he was bullied by the bus conductor who pushed him, and he fell. And what was shocking for me was that no one budged. And I got up and I helped him, and I took a piece of paper from my school bag, wrote the number of the bus and the name of the bus conductor because he was wearing a badge, and I asked the old man to get off at the next station and to go to the police station. And in the evening, my brother reported me to my dad, and he explained to my dad what I had done, and I had created a scene on the bus, and that he was very embarrassed by it. And my dad, to my surprise, or maybe not, praised me and reprimanded my brother. And told me, this is, my girl, this is justice. Justice is not only in the courtroom. This is justice.
Action on justice.
This is action. Yeah. And I'm very proud of you. But I think that's where this idea of becoming a lawyer took...
Ignited.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm curious, SRSG, as a child, what kind of child were you? A troublemaker? Were you shy? From the justice incident, you were bold. But how were you?
I was very shy.
You were very shy?
I was very shy. I come from a family of 6, and I was the 3rd child, and with a big gap between the first and the second. I don't know, I was like pressed by the two groups.
Trying to find your way there.
And I was very shy, and to tell you the truth, even after that incident, I never sort of told my father that I wanted to be a lawyer. It was like my inner secret. It was only when I got my A-level results that I told my dad I wanted to go to the UK, because that was the only place where I could study law, and that it was a surprise for the family, because they all assumed that she's so good in economics, she had great results, and she would be an economist. But I was very shy, and that also was like a bomb in the family.
It was a bold move.
Yes, and I recall one uncle actually who questioned my parents about this. Are you making the right choice? She's so shy. I mean, like.
Yeah, being a lawyer, standing in court.
Absolutely.
What keeps your hope intact, but also like carrying the voices of survivors in this work? How do you stay grounded?
Indeed, I mean, like what I see and what I hear can appear to be insurmountable, but I must say that it's the resilience of the survivors that keep me going. There's also the fact that survivors place their faith in me, and for me, I cannot betray that faith. They have hope, and they place their trust and faith in the United Nations. And for me, hope is not passive. I mean, hope must be translated in concrete action. This is what I said on the first day that I took office, that the mandate has the face of a survivor, a woman or a girl significantly impacted by the scourge of sexual violence, but also men and boys, that the mandate was created for them. And my strategic priority for the mandate was a survivor-centered approach. It was so critical to understand their experience and their needs and their wishes. They really frame my strategic priorities. And what gave me faith also is when I see the allies that I have. I mean, activists and whether it is local grassroots organization or international organization, and the large circle of allies, it gives me faith that we are working together for social justice.
There is a platform, there is a support, there is
Absolutely.
Mobilization.
And including member states, that I must say I have always benefited from great political support from member states.
Let's play a game. So it's called Back to the Future. We'll jump in time. I'll say your year and you tell us what Pramila Patten was doing in that moment. So let's start with the year I was born, 1987.
1987, I returned to the country. So I came back in 1982 as a barrister. In 1987, I was appointed as a magistrate. And I thought that maybe people had forgotten me, and so it would be good to join the judiciary for a while. And I also wanted to get that experience. So in 1987, for me, it's the year that I started in February as a district court magistrate. And I was also teaching at the university, teaching corporate law, commercial law, and industrial and intellectual property law.
2003.
2003, also another big year when I joined the CEDAW committee. I was elected in 2002, so I started serve as an independent expert on the committee and did a revolution within the committee with a group of also newly elected CEDAW experts. And I served on the committee for 16 years. I was elected 4 times.
Wow, 4 times.
Yes.
That's a great trust in your leadership. What about 2017?
Another big year. I never imagined I would quit the bar because I just passionate about my job as a barrister. And I did quit the bar in 2017, and I was appointed by the Secretary General in April as a SRSG, and I took office in June 2017. And my son also was called to the bar in September 2017. So it was a big year for me.
Yeah.
On all fronts.
It's like passing the baton to your son.
That's right, absolutely. So he took over my chambers.
Yeah, amazing. Do you think in this next decade there will be another big year for you where you look back and you say, this was another milestone after SRSG?
I hope so, because I still feel that I have a lot to offer and I still have the energy to do more. For me, it's payback.
Yeah.
I feel very privileged for the career that I've had. For me, it's really, this is not a job. For me, this is part of my returning back what I have been privileged to receive.
Okay, let's dig a bit more into your mandate. You have defined 3 strategic priorities for your mandate. One is accountability and ending impunity, prevention, and survivor-centered response. So 9 years in this role, what's your hardest truth that you've been sitting with?
After 9 years in office, and after 17 years of the existence of this mandate, with a solid normative framework, we've no less than 6 Security Council resolutions specifically dealing with conflict-related sexual violence. And what is distressing is the fact that sexual violence is on the rise. And that was not the case a few years back. The hard truth that the majority of perpetrators will go unpunished, and that the majority of survivors will never have their day in court. And I have invested a lot in impressing on all the UN entities the importance of the survivor-centered approach. I was getting pushback and I was being told, no, we don't want to create a hierarchy of survivors. We treat all survivors of GBV as GBV in the same way. And I invested a lot of time and energy basically to drive the survivor-centered approach, which today is accepted. But to find that the survivors today are bearing the brunt of every conflict, and to also see that at the time when they most need it, the majority of survivors are not able to reach a clinic within the 72-hour window. To a certain extent, I see a donor fatigue with regard to some protracted conflict. And that is the disheartening part. I mean, like, I go on field mission and I create expectations and I cannot deliver. I was in South Sudan where I met a group of children born of rape. And I knew what they needed, and I started figuring the kind of project that I need to get implemented through the Multi-Partner Trust Fund. But up to now, I have not been able to fund any project specifically for children born of rape, for example. So that is the disheartening part of the work.
And the increase of sexual violence and conflict, because the conflicts are also increasing.
Yes,
and the wars.
A couple of years ago, I would say no, sexual violence is not increasing. It's just that the work that this office has done on combating stigma is resulting in the fact that the survivors are coming forward, they are breaking the silence. But today I can tell you for sure, proliferation of conflict, that the sexual violence is really, like in Sudan, where sexual violence is part of the organizational policy of RSF as per the finding of the fact-finding mission, whether it is in DRC, where a few years back, before the resumption of hostilities with M23, I was discussing with the SRSG of MONUSCO, and she was saying that she agrees with me that there was a lot of opportunistic rape. But today it's not the case. Today it is being used as a tactic of war to dehumanize, to destabilize, and to instill fear in these communities. And it is, for all intents and purposes, a very effective tool of war and cost-free.
I mean, we see, especially in African countries, and probably your report is 80% African countries, but when Africans look at the global stage and see the attention to different areas in the world, is African suffering less to the international community? Are women in African countries receiving the less support, the less attention?
I don't believe that anyone suffering from one continent or the other is less or more. But I understand your question, and I think it is a legitimate question to a certain extent. Because yes, conflict like Sudan or DRC, they do not reach the headlines. I see a chilling indifference at times. There's little outrage. I recall being before the Security Council and speaking about a woman in Ethiopia who had been raped by 27 soldiers. And I stopped and looked around, and it was business as usual. I didn't see any expression of shock or dismay, and that is the reality. Even the heads of government in these African countries, they don't talk about it. When I was in Sudan last year, I talked to the vice president and I told him that there is a perception from the women in Sudan, from the survivors that I had met in Chad or in South Sudan, including the diaspora, the civil society organizations, that his government didn't care that this war was being fought on the bodies of women and girls. And I urged him to send a different signal to the survivors of sexual violence, to the women and girls of his country, but also to the perpetrators, mainly RSF, and to sign a framework of cooperation with my office, which he did. But what I find disturbing is that even these African governments, they do not speak about the sexual violence being inflicted on the women and the girls, unlike in Ukraine, for example, where 4 days after the Russian aggression, the foreign minister and the prime minister spoke openly as soon as the first cases surfaced. And to date, the government is so focused on the prevention and response to conflict-related sexual violence. They reached out to the office. We signed a framework of cooperation within a month, and conflict-related sexual violence has not faded from their priorities. It remains a priority for the government of Ukraine. Look at the government of Israel after the 7th of October attacks. They were also very outspoken on the sexual violence. And that is lacking and missing from our from the African governments. I'm not saying they're not doing anything. They are, but they're not vocal about it. They could bring more spotlight on the sexual violence happening in their country.
When you walk into the Security Council chamber, I mean, you brief them often on sexual violence, and you look at the faces of the very governments whose armies appear in your report. What goes through your mind there? Because you're fighting for each country to have this priority, but also in between countries, there is a lot of conflict that they're not walking the talk.
Well, it's I have mixed feelings about it. To a certain extent, I say to myself, what a farce. The hypocrisy of it all, when these same member states will make grand speeches and will be in complete denial. Or I see member states who are not perpetrators of sexual violence, but they are fueling conflicts by providing arms, and they sit nicely there and deliver a great speech. But I'm always, at the same time, I'm conscious of the fact that, okay, this is the place that they have to sit and listen. And the annual report of the Secretary General, which is the only historical record on sexual violence, is before the Council. And they have to sit there and listen. So it's also the power of the mandate to a certain extent, and that's disheartening.
Yeah. So since we're talking about empty promises, let's play a game called Red Line or Rhetoric. So red line means it's real action, and rhetoric is empty promises. So I'll give you a statement and let's see what you think. UN resolutions without enforcement.
Rhetoric. It's an empty promise because there's no real machinery for its enforcement.
No funding, no accountability, no mechanisms
Absolutely.
on the ground. Sanctions against perpetrators.
Real. This is a red line because sanctions can hurt and does hurt. I have seen the power of sanctions firsthand. Even the threat of sanctions, I have seen its power. But sanctions in the form of travel bans, asset freeze, arms embargo, can really hurt those groups, those armed groups and terrorist groups that make sexual violence part of the political economy of war. So it is real.
Peace agreements that ignore survivors.
To a great extent, it can, yes, can be a rhetoric, because even if peace agreement reference survivors, in practice there's real traction. It hardly translates in real accountability for perpetrators.
Naming and shaming armed groups.
Oh, very much a red line, because yes, the annex to the Secretary General's report lists over 60 parties to conflict, and this is a list that is taken seriously mainly by state actors. I must say they immediately engage with the office, and they call it the list of shame or the blacklist. So it just shows that it's something that hurts them, and they engage because they want to get off the list.
Yeah. People want always to get on the list or out of the list, depends on how harmful it is. Survivor reparation funds.
Oh, that's very real. That's very real. And we have made huge progress in the area of reparations, because that's an area where I got my team of experts to focus on. So we took it as a thematic focus, supporting a number of countries with their reparations law, from Guinea to Iraq to DRC, Colombia, and Ukraine. We have supported and we have seen not only the adoption of reparations law, but establishment of reparations fund.
Last year, you introduced a focus on championing youth engagement for your office. Why do you think youth leadership is critical to this agenda, to this mandate, and what do you think the role of youth movements could be to prevent sexual violence from before even the conflict starts?
I really believe in the force and the potential that youth can play in prevention, precisely, and I'm also I'm leading this mandate with the firm conviction and belief that this is preventable, and hence my engagement with youth and with your good self, appointed as one of my global champion. This is a firm conviction that I see the potential, because I see youth not only as the leaders of tomorrow, but the change makers of today. Youth has a way and the power to engage with communities in a completely different way that can lead to concrete results. And youth has proven how they can, the breakthroughs in different areas, whether it is climate action, and I know that even on conflict-related sexual violence, investing in youth is the way forward, and the way that youth leverage social media. On prevention, I see a huge role to be played by youth, but we have to equip them with the relevant tools for that.
Men who raped women sit at the peace table. Do you think the pursuit of peace betrays survivors, where we know that these tables don't have women, let alone survivors?
Yes, to a certain extent. If women are not at the peace table and do not bring the perspective of conflict-related sexual violence, yes, we are to a significant extent betraying the survivors, because they cannot we cannot sacrifice the plight of those survivors at the altar of expediency, and very often this is what is happening. Although there is no amnesty per se, following Security Council Resolution 1888 that actually prohibits any amnesty. But accountability does not emerge as a strong component. It's about men's with gun forgiving other men's with gun. But worse, I have seen peace negotiations where there has been veto from I mean, like I was in Afghanistan, where in those days, in 2003, where the Taliban, they were saying it's women or peace. But I think it has not changed much. Yeah. So in the composition of who is at the table, it's really very much women or peace. And the worst part of it is that women are not at the peace table, survivors are not at the peace table, but survivors are not even on the menu. That is the reality. And that, for me, is a betrayal.
Yeah. There is a growing fatigue around multilateralism and institutions like the UN. We see the UN today challenged, defunded, dismissed, even in its statements. Do you think the UN is still relevant?
I think now more than ever before. It's true that we're going through very troubled times where the needs of the most vulnerable are looming large, and the UN, with dwindling resources, is really challenged and is being attacked. But I think the UN is more relevant than ever before. I think the UN remains the place, the essential ground where member states come together to solve problems that no one can solve alone. Yes, I mean, after all, we have to remember that the UN was created not to take us to heaven, but to save us from hell. And I think the UN is very much relevant.
I think particularly African feminists would pretty much criticize how relevant the UN to the movements on the ground. There is a rhetoric of UN being extractive from communities, maybe free consultation, but no real action afterwards. I mean, we are at CSW year after year, feminists submit recommendations, but then they come the next year, they don't see much of the transformation. What would you respond to that as well, for not losing trust of the feminist movement into the UN system?
Well, I don't think it's a totally legitimate criticism against the UN. I mean, if you're talking about CSW, I think we have a lot to showcase in terms of progress, in terms of support that the UN provides. I prioritize survivors. That's why I bring survivors to the UN, to the Security Council, to speak to member states. I create that bridge I invite civil society organizations. I create the space because for me it's not about taking away. It's about giving back in the form of holistic services. So I don't think it's an entirely legitimate criticism against the UN.
But we can do better. We can do better, definitely.
If resources permit, yes.
So in 2050, sexual violence in conflict, what do you hope the world will say about, especially for Africa?
2050, sexual violence to be a closed chapter, and that all the resolutions that we have constitute a solid promise to all women and girls who can live free from the fear of violence.
So when history looks back at this generation of leaders, your generation, what do you hope it will say you did right?
Well, I really hope that they will say that she was not a passive observer of these horrors, and that she has, in her 9 years, succeeded in shaping global policy around it. They will recognize the work that I have done on prevention and the prevention framework that I have rolled out for many years that would have borne its fruits. Her focus on the survivors have paid off. I will tell my grandchildren about women of Sudan or DRC or Haiti and Myanmar, and look back on these as abhorrent, and that it's now a relic of history, and we have passed this phase.
I hope so too. In one sentence, Africa in 2050, how do you see it?
Hope. Africa must flourish and will flourish and will become a very powerful continent and can be.
Thank you so much, SRSG.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
From the courts of Mauritius to the Security Council chambers of New York, Pramila Patten reminds us that sexual violence in war is not inevitable. It is a crime that demands accountability. Her work challenges governments, armed groups, and institutions to confront one of the most brutal weapons of war and to place survivors at the center of justice. I am Aya Shebi, and this is Africa Link. Until next time, stay bold, stay African, and stay building the future.